Hey, I'm Shaye Wanner, and you are listening to the Casual Cattle Conversations podcast. And today we are visiting with Jamie Corder from the University of Missouri, and she is going to dive into what the research on hair shedding is, why they even started researching it, and how producers are applying it today across the country to make selections for the cows that are going to pay off for them. It's a really interesting conversation. It's a unique one to the show, but maybe not as the industry as a whole. And I think you're going to really enjoy it. Remember to check us out on YouTube as well if you're more of a video podcaster. But with that, let's visit with Jamie.
Are you in or are you out? Don't spend another day, week, month, or year spinning in circles, consumed by putting out the daily fires, and coming in at night more stressed and frustrated than you left because you aren't making any progress on the ranch. Start making intentional management decisions that lead to measurable progress while reducing your stress load today by joining Building a More Intentional Operation, a 4-part Rancher Mind series featuring Jasper Olchin from Heritage and Horizons. Jasper is going to walk us through defining our direction on the ranch, identifying what matters most, turning focus into action, and moving from reaction mode to ready. Jasper's a rancher herself who knows what it's like to go through all of this with us. So I'm really excited to see what she has to share with us. We're going to learn which to-do list tasks matter and start working toward profit, period. Learn more in the description.
Jamie, welcome to the podcast. I'm excited to talk about hair shedding today. So welcome to the show.
Yeah, thanks for having me.
Why don't you tell listeners a little bit about your background in the research of hair shedding and everything that's going on there?
I have been an assistant professor and genetics extension specialist here at the University of Missouri for going on 3 years. And if you are a part of the University of Missouri or you know about the university, hair shedding is the number one trait that comes to mind. And so I have been researching it. I knew about it before coming here. I spent 5 years in industry prior to accepting the job here. So very familiar with it, but really getting in the throes of research and analysis and results and things like that over the past 3 years. And I've been traveling both across the state of Missouri and the nation talking about it here since my time here at Mizzou.
And so why is hair shedding so important? Why is it being researched?
So it's funny how it happened. Hair shedding was researched in actually different species before we moved into cattle. And it started with this idea that in the southeastern part of the United States, summers are hot and humid. And in addition to that, in the southeastern part of the United States, we have fescue. Right? Now, you're in North Dakota, you don't have to deal with endophyte-infected fescue, but the deal is that endophyte causes the blood vessels within the cattle to vasoconstrict and reduce blood flow throughout the body. And that's why you see a lot of cattle standing in ponds and water and things like that. And it's due to heat stress, but it's made even worse due to that fescue here in the southeastern part of the U.S. So that's where it started. No one wants to be building fence in July wearing a Carhartt coat, right? So if we can select or better understand how cattle shed that winter coat going from winter into summer, then maybe we can help mitigate some of that summer heat stress, especially in fescue. I think the first paper on this that I know of was published back in 2011, found that mama cows who shed their coat earlier in either the spring or early summer weaned heavier calves than cows that shed their coats later. And so if we think about that, that makes a lot of sense. Cows that are heat stressed are less likely to become pregnant, right? Because they're under that stress, they're losing body condition. So nutritionally, they're probably not well prepared for breeding. And so the ones that did shed their coat earlier actually weaned an older and heavier calf. Also, if cows are lactating in the summer and they're under heat stress, that probably impacts their milk production. So cows that were under less heat stress were able to provide more of that milk to their progeny or their calves at side, also increasing that weaning weight. So it's kind of a twofold reason. Now, fast forward a little bit, when the University of Missouri stepped in, Dr. Jared Decker here is my predecessor in my role. He's still here, but I'm in that extension role. He looked at within the American Simmental Association cattle, he had about 14,000 records on when cows shed their coat and the subsequent weaning weight of their calves. And I guess I could back up and tell you hair shedding is scored on a scale of 1 to 5. Okay, so 5 means they have that fluffy winter coat, and 1 is that smooth, slick summer coat that we like to see. Cows that had a hair shed score of 1 weaned a calf that weighed 45 pounds more at weaning than one with a hair shed score of 5. Now take that 45 pounds, multiply it by 100 calves, and then multiply it by what calves are selling for per pound today, right? That makes it a very economically relevant trait.
You've talked about heat stress and everything that trickles down to it, right down to what you've just finished up with, those heavier weaning weights across your herd. It's gonna make a difference economically. Are there other benefits to cows who shed their coats sooner outside of what we just discussed?
That's the number one thing. It deals with animal welfare, pregnancy rates, and reduction of heat stress. Now, one of the interesting things, and this is a very recent study that Dr. Decker and others did here at the University of Missouri. I think it was published actually last year in 2025. They did kind of a genome-wide association study, and that's just a fancy way of saying they took the entire bovine genome, piece of DNA by piece of DNA, and they looked to see what the relationship was between hair shedding, so how soon an animal shed her coat, and change in temperature, right? Because why do you take off your winter coat? Because you're hot, right? Or are they responding to a change in daylight? Because what also happens as we move from winter to spring to summer, daylight increases. And then when they ran that analysis and they looked at the genetic signals and relationships between hair shed score and change in temperature, they only found 17 associations. So very small numbers if we think about how many pieces of DNA cattle have. It's in the millions. But when they looked at the relationship between hair shedding and change in daylight, they found over 1,000. So we are starting to believe as research progresses that these cattle are shedding their coat not in response to temperature, but in response to change in daylight. And I think that's especially important because it's indicative of how cattle can adapt and respond to their environment, which is an economically relevant trait no matter where you are, right? If we can better select cattle that can adapt to the environment that they're in, whether that's Mother Nature or management decisions, that has a lot of economic repercussions, most of which we probably don't even know about. And as far as it comes to production of a cow-calf operation or even within a seed stock operation. And so all of that to say that when hair shedding first started, it focused on the southeastern part of the U.S., but what we're learning is that regardless of whether it's heat stress or fescue or just nationwide or even worldwide, hair shedding can be an indicator trait of something much bigger.
Is that ability to shed hair equally flipped with their ability to put it on if they are in a northern climate?
So that's a lot of questions that we've gotten from people in the northern part of the U.S., and we don't have any results as far as that goes. That's not something that's been researched on the flip side of this. And the other question that I always get asked is for those people who are in kind of a show type setting where they want animals to hold on to their hair longer or they're trying to breed for thicker, fuller coats of hair. There's actually some research being done down in Australia where they have the hair shedding system, so how quickly an animal sheds their coat, and then a hair coat system, which is how thick and long the hair is. And what we're learning is that how quickly an animal sheds their coat and how thick and long their hair is are genetically different traits.
That's interesting because when you were talking about the hair shedding and how you're seeing that it's how cattle are responding to change in environment, I almost would have thought they would have followed pattern. So that's very interesting. But it doesn't surprise me because chickens change their laying patterns with sunlight, and there are other livestock species that have other production traits or even hair shedding that are different because of the change in daylight that happens. So it's good to know, but I think when you tie it back to other species, it's neat to see it be across the board, how there's different impacts. So you touched on the scoring system, that 1 to 5. When do you recommend producers take hair shedding scores?
Yeah, so I'm going to give you the typical extension answer of it depends. I'll first start with how cattle shed their coat because I think that helps to answer the question. So cattle shed their coat, I joke, but it's real, just like humans do. top to bottom, front to back. Most mammals shed their coats in the same kind of pattern. So if you've ever actually looked at your cattle going into early spring, late spring, you'll kind of notice this. You just don't know you've ever really noticed it. So it starts along their neck. So they start to get splotchy along their neck first. So 5 is that thick winter coat. 4 is when it's disappeared from their neck. Next, they lose it along their top line. And once that top line is completely clear, it gets kind of splotchy on the sides. And so that is a hair shed score of 3. And then they'll lose it kind of along their side and into their belly. And then it's only remaining on their belly and then their flank and their hindquarter. That's a score of 2. And then when they're completely shed off, that's a score of 1. Okay. So neck, back, side, belly to hindquarter, right? If we think about how that could progress. And so when you want to go out and hair shed score your cows, first and foremost is, if at all possible, do them on the same day or as close to the same day as you can, because it's not fair to go out and do this in one pasture and then go out 2 weeks later and do it in another one, because that's not an apples to apples comparison. So you want to be able to do it on the same day or as close to the same day as possible, depending on the number of cows. But the good news is you can do this in your side-by-side with your favorite beverage and your significant other, right? This isn't something that you have to run cattle through the chute for. And we all like looking at our cows, right? So it's not really a hard ask. And so when you want to do it is when you notice the most variation in the herd. Because if you go out and do it and they're all still fluffy, it's too early. If you go out and do it and they're all slick, then it's too late, right? You're not visibly seeing the genetic variation that they possess for the trait. And so it'll look almost like a bell curve, where most of your herd will be a hair shed score of 3. They'll be kind of splotchy on their side. You'll have some that are completely slick, and you'll have some that are completely fluffy. So some 1s, some 5s, most 3s in that normal distribution, some 2s and some 4s. Because what that allows you to do is visualize the ones that shed early and the ones that shed late, right? You can visibly see that in your herd. Typically, in the state of Missouri, normally that's mid-May, late May, depending on the year. For a state as far north as North Dakota, it may be earlier than that. You know, you guys see sunlight and longer days probably before we do, right? So it's just going to depend on the environment that you're in and obviously the genetics of the cattle.
I would still say that May timeframe is still pretty likely for us up here. Do you recommend just the cows or also the calves with that?
Yeah, that's a great follow-up question. I was actually going to back up and say, because you can do so many cows at once, this research has been done a lot in the cows. But we forget about the bulls, right? They contribute 50% of their genetics onto the next generation of progeny. And so males, because of the amount of testosterone and the difference in the hormones that they have in their bodies, they will actually shed their winter coat at least 2 weeks earlier than cows. Keep in mind, if you're wanting to just better understand how your bulls are shedding their winter coat, or if you're a seed stock breeder and you're wanting to add this to the bull sale catalog, you need to be doing it even sooner than you are on your cows, just because they will lose that coat faster. On the calves, it depends. I'm trying to get a research project together to look at this, but anecdotally, what we have noticed in Missouri, if a calf is a spring-born calf, then they go through that first summer with weird hair. It's fine, right? But then by the time they go through their second summer, they've been through a full, what I call a photo period, right? They've been through spring, summer, fall, winter, spring, and now they're seeing summer. And so in calves, I don't know if I necessarily recommend it, but if we're talking about yearling spring heifers, it's absolutely completely a great time to start doing that. If you're wanting to add that into like a culling decision of, these are all my bred heifers, these are the ones that shed late, maybe I should cull the ones that are late shedders and keep the ones that shed sooner. That's absolutely a possibility. Now, you mentioned your fall calver. That's where it gets a little bit interesting. The state of Missouri is a fall calving state. I'm from Nebraska and South Dakota, where spring calving is kind of what we do, but coming down here, it's a primarily fall calving state. What we've noticed is they're born in the fall, they go through winter, spring, and that first summer. And it's a condensed period of time. And I actually am not confident that first summer shedding event is indicative of their future shedding ability. They tend to hold on to the hair longer. And if I think about cattle shedding their hair in response to change in daylight, that kind of makes sense because they haven't been through a full photo period. Their brains and their hormones haven't had enough time to really adapt to how daylight changes to really express their true genetic potential for hair shedding. Now, I don't have the data to support that, but anecdotally in Missouri, I have heard tons of cow-calf producers say that first summer for a fall-born calf is not indicative of their future shedding. So I honestly don't know if I would put a lot of weight in that for like a replacement heifer selection decision. I would wait until her actual second summer to make a true decision on that.
I would agree with that. We just kind of call them the fall calf fuzz. And they do shed it off. You'll watch them shed it off. But I do think it takes longer compared to seeing spring-born calves go through. So that's interesting.
And the other thing that I'll mention too, that I tell people who are like, this sounds like a great thing, I'm going to go out, I'm going to start doing it. You're going to go out, hopefully, and you're going to do your whole cow herd, right? Within a relatively short time frame. What you will notice is that your yearling heifers, and especially your first calf heifers, and those younger cows, they're going to have higher scores than your older cows. Okay? But let's talk about why. I like talking about a first calf heifer that's bred. So she's got a calf at side, and then hopefully she's bred for a second. What is she doing herself during that? She's growing herself. She's got a calf at side, and you're trying to get her to grow another one. That's a lot of energy, a lot of just overall stress that we put on that animal's body. And hair shedding is the last thing that she's going to do. When we look at the age distribution and then the hair shed scores, what we've noticed is that younger animals will always have a higher hair shed score than older, mature cows in the same year. It's just a reflection of the management system and where they're at in their life cycle. Now, if that heifer who sheds at least early compared to her contemporaries, there's still going to be early and late shedders in those heifers. If she sheds early and she becomes a cow, she's going to become one of your early shedding cows. It's just a reflection of where she's at in her nutrient requirements, energy demands, and where she is in her life cycle.
So what you're saying is score those heifers and those younger cows, your coming second calvers, compare them to one another, to their contemporary group, their age group. Don't compare them to your mature cows, is what you're saying.
Because you'll be discouraged, right? You'll say, these are my younger, my best genetics, and they still have hair. And that's okay. That's to be expected. Keep them over here. Make your selection decisions where you can, but don't compare them to their moms or to the mature cows that you have in your herd, because it's just not a fair comparison.
So back to the scoring process. When my family does, whether it's udder scoring, foot scoring, body condition scores, we leave that to one person.
Yeah.
And maybe they have someone else to refer to, but it's the same one or two people doing it consistently. Is that something you recommend?
So that's a really good question. Let's say you go out tomorrow in late May, early June, and you want to hair shed score your animals. I would say that one person should do it for the cow herd. Now, if you and your spouse want to do it together and compare, that's fine. But one person should do that. You don't want one person doing half the herd and one person doing the other half. But if you want to do it this year and then your spouse do it next year, that's also completely fine, because if you're reporting it to a genetic evaluation, the contemporary groups within the genetic evaluation will take care of the fact that there's a year-to-year difference in observers.
So is this hair shedding applicable across all breeds? I know you talked about Simmental. I know Red Angus has been involved in it. What about other breeds?
Yes. Here at the University of Missouri, we've done research in almost all breeds of cattle. And what we find when we actually estimate an EPD for hair shedding in animals, regardless of breed, there's just as much variation in hair shedding genetic potential within breed as there is across. So what I mean by that is, regardless of breed, there is some ones and there's some fives. There is just as much genetic variability across breeds, and so it's not a single breed problem. It's not even a problem, really. It's just a biological happening that we're trying to select for in a positive direction, and that exists across all breeds.
So you're talking about hair shedding as a selection tool. How much emphasis should producers put on it? Because you've already talked about it trickles down to maybe late breds or opens, which sort themselves out because of it. So how much emphasis should be put on it from your perspective?
I think it just depends on the operation. I can tell you that there are some producers in Missouri, that's their number one selection criteria, especially on a commercial operation, because they have seen and they understand the economic impact that it has on their operation. You mentioned, does an open or a cull kind of sort itself out on the back end? But what if you could select for hair shedding and have less opens and have more of them that are bred? Or what if you could select for hair shedding and increase your weaning weight by 20 pounds on average per calf? So essentially, hair shedding is kind of a preemptive selection to create better genetic merit within your cattle for all of these other traits that are either directly or indirectly impacted by hair shedding. And the other thing that I'll note too, hair shedding is just as heritable, if not more heritable, than weaning weight. So even if you just go out and visually hair shed score your cows, you're gonna see a phenotypic or a productive change in those animals from one generation to the next. I did a 2-day extension event earlier this month, and we were talking a lot about where you rank hair shedding in your selection process, because there's so many other things of importance. You already mentioned teat and udder, feet and leg, right? There's all of these things that are important. And I think you have to rank it with all of the other genetic change you're trying to make. Do you have an udder problem? Do you have a claw issue? Do you have a temperament issue? What genetically are you trying to accomplish, and where can hair shedding rank within that? And then you have to weight that accordingly.
I appreciate the proactive perspective, as you brought up. So my husband and I do the genomic testing on our replacement heifers to help pick our replacement heifers, right? And when we started doing it, I guess we've only done it 3 years, so we're still starting if you think about it in the long run. But there were cows that have been in the herd for 10, 12 years, but none of their daughters stick around. So now I'm wondering, did those daughters not shed like their mother did? Was that part of it?
And that was the other thing I thought of too when I thought about this age differentiation between younger cows have higher scores and older cows have lower scores. It's the same thing. Is it a reflection of the older cows who were later shedders already self-culled themselves out for whatever reason? They weaned a small calf. They didn't get pregnant. They did some other production thing that you didn't like along the way, and you culled her when you could have culled her earlier because she was a bad shedder. We'll never know because we don't have those cull codes, but it's something that also comes to mind when I think about it.
Yeah, you're making me want to hop on the side-by-side and go score everything tonight. Jamie, is there anything else related to this topic that we haven't touched on today?
I give this talk quite a bit, and I had a producer come up to me and say, I've never seen an open BCS 3 or 4 cow come through my chute that wasn't a hair shed score of 5. And so it just gets me to thinking, hair shedding is genetic. It is highly heritable. If a cow holds onto her hair for a long time, in my opinion, I think she's trying to tell you something. She's trying to tell you that she doesn't match her environment, whether that's she needs more supplementation, she's got some nutrient deficiency, she needs dewormed, she's under heat stress. Something is going on in that animal that they're trying to communicate to you that they don't match their environment. And so genetically, if we can start at least looking at our cows, looking at our, maybe not calves, but younger animals, and saying, you're a 5, I have room to cull some animals, you probably need to go. There's something that could be said for that. You don't need to say, oh, do I keep a 3 over a 4? To me, it's, if she's a 5, then she's telling you she doesn't match her environment, and then maybe she's better off in someone else's environment. Or maybe she needs some sort of intervention. If you can figure that out, consult with a veterinarian. But all in all, for me, I think that those animals that hold on to that hair late into the summer, they're just trying to tell you something. And it's up to you to either cull that animal or try and figure it out.
All right. Jamie, I really appreciate this conversation today. If people want to learn more about hair shedding, scoring, anything along the topic, where can they go?
Yeah, after I got here, we created 3 extension publications that are on the University of Missouri Extension website. There's one on how to hair shed score, and then some frequently asked questions that touches on almost everything that we talked about today. And then there's one, if you're curious about the research behind how hair shedding impacts weaning weight, there's one on heat stress and weaning weight. And then there's another one on that more recent research project that I was talking about in regards to animals adapting and responding to changes in their environment.
All right, thank you. I believe it's titled Hair Shedding Scores More Than Heat Stress. I do have that one set up to go in the description. And if you're a longtime listener and know I'm bad about putting links in the description, it's already copy-pasted, so it shouldn't get forgotten. But if there's more you want to find out about and you're a listener, you know how to get a hold of me. Just head to my website and hit the Contact Us page. Jamie, thanks for joining.
Thanks for having me.
All right, folks, the best way to support this podcast and all your other favorite podcasts is to leave a rating or review, and better yet, share it with a friend who's going to find this information valuable. Like I talked about, if you have questions to get a hold of me, you can also get a hold of me via my website or social media to let me know what you're thinking about the podcast or the whole show. Remember to check us out on YouTube, and happy ranching, folks.